talk about the Detroit Lions. Right now, the Lions are 12-1 on the season. And some will say this is the best team in the NFL. I will say this right here. When I look at the Detroit Lions, even when they're down star players, they always find a way to win. And that's what the best teams in the NFL do. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They're in a lot of close football games this year. They win those games. The Detroit Lions, they'll pummel on teams. Even in close football games, they find a way to win. The same with the Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens in certain matchups, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Those are the top tier teams in the NFL. But it seems like it's a huge gap between the Detroit Lions and the rest of the teams in the NFL. I want to give everyone credit in this video, from the coaches to the general manager. And speaking of the general manager, the man that you see right now is Brad Holmes. Personally, when I hear about the Detroit Lions, all I hear about is Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, the players on the field, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator. But I rarely hear about Brad Holmes, who has been a terrific general manager with the Detroit Lions over the last few years. This man has been phenomenal. This man right here has basically orchestrated the on-the-field product right now. If you're a Lions fan, give this man his credit. He deserves his flowers. In my opinion, right now, the best general manager in the NFL. He has done a phenomenal job by drafting talent, bringing in the right talent and free agency, and making trades for when star players like Aiden Hutchinson go down. He makes a trade to the Cleveland Browns and bring in another star pass rusher and Zadarius Smith. So give Brad Holmes a lot of credit. Now I want to go into the coaching aspect. Dan Campbell is a madman. Many years ago, he came out in the press conference and he said, hey, we're going to bite kneecaps off. We're going to be tough. We're going to be physical. And he was very emotional at the end of one of the seasons when they had a loss, because that's how much effort they puts into this team, how much effort he puts into his organization. And just within a few years, the Detroit Lions went from being one of the weaker teams in the NFL to now a Super Bowl perennial contender in the NFL. It's a modern comeback story for the Detroit Lions. That's why so many people were rooting for them last year to go out there and go to the Super Bowl and possibly win the Super Bowl. If they're going to win a Super Bowl, this is the best chance you have in Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn on your coaching staff. But Dan Campbell has came out and established a true grit culture, and it's the Detroit way, the Motor City way, to be rough and aggressive at the line of scrimmage, not just on the offensive end, but also on the defensive end. These players, they go out there and they play with their heart in their sleeves, and the one thing that I love, they're not selfish. We hear a lot of complaints about top wide receivers in the NFL. Why don't I get the football more? Unlock this player. They go to social media and say free number 3, for example, like Jordan Addison many weeks ago with the Minnesota Vikings. He said free Addison because he wanted the football more. You don't see that with the Detroit Lions. Some weeks, St. Brown may go out there and get 119 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. The next week, he may only have 40 receiving yards. He's not complaining because the team is winning. And even when they don't win, they have each other's back because they've been through hell together. And I want to start off with that. The fact that they have been through the losses together with Dan Campbell. They have seen the ugly times, and now they're seeing the great times because of it, because he was building this culture. That unselfishness is going to take them a long way in the NFL, and it already has. When you have a guy in Jared Goff that has been to a Super Bowl before, and he lost that Super Bowl against New England Patriots. This is also a man that's been through a lot of adversity. You would think a guy that got selected with the first overall pick had a solid career with the Los Angeles Rams. Some first-round pick quarterbacks never even go to a Super Bowl. He went to a Super Bowl. He lost. They moved off of him for Matthew Stafford, who gave the Detroit Lions so many great years. They moved off of him. He was basically the throwaway player in that trade at the time. Many people thought, hey, what would the Lions do? Would they go out there? Would they draft a quarterback to get rid of Jared Goff? He had to scratch and claw his way back to being a star quarterback in the NFL. And you can say a lot of bad things about Jared Goff, but he is a very good quarterback, especially inside the pocket. He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL when you have the offensive line around him. And Jared Goff has been through that adversity. That's going to help the Detroit Lions long term also. That's why you gave him a major contract extension, because you look at Jared Goff, he may not have the same talent or skill set as a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen, and that's okay. That's why you have these pieces around him, and he can get the most out of these players with this offensive line. And then you talk about Ben Johnson, who has basically turned Jared Goff's career completely around. This was a man that many people looked at with the Los Angeles Rams. He was their weakest link. They looked at him. That's why they lost that Super Bowl against the New England Patriots, which was unfair. But he was a huge reason why they lost that Super Bowl. But at the same time, a lot of things were out of his hands. You look at the Detroit Lions right now. You have Ben Johnson, One of the best offensive minds in the NFL. One day he's going to be a great head coach in this league. The way that they use their offensive weapons. They have left tackles playing wide receiver against the Dallas Cowboys. They have these guys going out there running flip plays behind the line of scrimmage. On Thanksgiving Day against the Chicago Bears, you don't see that happening with most teams in the NFL. In my opinion, this is the best offensive line in the league, from tackle to tackle. When you talk about Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow at the left guard position, Frank Ragnow at the center position, Kevin Zeitler, right guard position, Penei Sewell, right tackle. He is a superstar. You made the case that he's the best right tackle in the NFL. You have an offensive line, even when one of the tackles go down, they're still so freaking good on this line. And it opens up everything for this offensive line. They built this team like how football teams were built in the 80s and the 90s, off the trenches and then through the quarterback. You make your life easier with Jared Goff because he's not getting beat up and banged up the entire game. They're able to run the football with Jahmyr Gibbs, who you selected in the first round, which was a controversial pick at the time. But you have Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery. They call him Sonic and Knuckles. That's what the Detroit Lions fan base call them. And that's the name that resonates because Knuckles is the bruiser. And that's what David Montgomery is, while Jahmyr Gibbs is Sonic. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs will have a costly fumble, like how he possibly had against Chicago Bears. They were able to bounce back from that. He had a fumble against the San Francisco 49ers in the NFL playoffs last year. But he's learned from that. And Jahmyr Gibbs is a very good running back. He's one of the most talented running backs in the NFL, and also is David Montgomery. David Montgomery can catch the football at the backfield. That's what a lot of people don't really understand, is that David Montgomery is more than just your in-between the tackles running back. You may look at David Montgomery and say, hey, he's the power back of the team, and that's true. 771 rushing yards on the year, 12 rushing touchdowns. He's averaging 4 yards a carry. But when you look at what he's been able to do in the receiving game, it's pretty impressive. When you look at Dave Montgomery, his ability to break tackles in the open space and to be able to go out there and to get yards after the catch, it's pretty phenomenal. Look at what he did against the Seattle Seahawks in that matchup. You look at Jahmyr Gibbs, he's the do-it-all running back, but he has the speed. He's one of the fastest players in the NFL. And it is making life easier for Jared Goff. Not only do they value offensive line as weapons, they value their running backs as really dual threats. And you look at this wide receiving core, you have St. Brown, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. This is a down year for him. And this is still a very good year for most wide receivers in the NFL. Sam Laporta, who was a star tight end last season, he still is. His numbers are down because the other pieces around him. Jameson Williams, who you selected in the first round a couple of years ago, was coming off a torn ACL from Alabama. He wasn't the same wide receiver's rookie season. He's dealt with a suspension here and there, but now he has his head on straight. Dealt with a gambling issue. But now you look at Jameson Williams. He's one of the best deep threats in the NFL. Every time he has the ball in his hand, the defense have to take account for him, because if you don't, it's a 50-plus yard touchdown to the house automatically. And you have to worry about St. Brown killing you underneath. If you can't cover tight ends, you have Sam Laporta. Then you look at Tim Patrick, who's also dealt with adversity. For the ones that don't know, he missed pretty much 2 years of his career dealing with injuries with the Denver Broncos. And they released him. He comes over to the Detroit Lions, and he's a very good player. This is a man that has potential to be a top number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. And right now you can make the case that he's the number 3, number 4 target with the Detroit Lions in that pecking order. And he's a very good player, especially in the red zone. Look at what he did against the Green Bay Packers. This is a special football player, and he's a big target to have on the field. You have Khalif Raymond also. Khalif Raymond is on IR. He's a very good wide receiver on second and third down. They have weapons all over the field. This is a complete football team, and it starts off with the offense with Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was a former tight end in the NFL for the New Orleans Saints, so you know that he knows a thing or two about the offensive line and about the tight end position and how to get guys open. And you look at Ben Johnson, what he's been able to do. This man was a hot head coaching candidate last season. He wanted to come back to the Detroit Lions. More than likely, he will not be with the Detroit Lions coaching staff next season, but we will see. It's a great chance that he will be a head coach next season. It would be great to see him stick with the Detroit Lions for at least one more season, because how great of a coordinator he is. But give Dan Campbell a lot of credit for bringing him in and letting him be the offensive coordinator. That man deserves a lot of credit for turning Jared Goff's career around, looking at this offensive line and the running backs that they have. Give Brad Holmes that credit for drafting in the talent, and Dan Campbell for coaching up these guys and giving them that culture. Now look at this defense. The defense is always an afterthought with the Detroit Lions unless they're giving up a lot of big points. And we saw that last season. Aaron Glenn And if you're a Detroit Lions fan, you've heard this before. Some people had a lot of criticism of Aaron Glenn in the past. Aaron Glenn is a very good defensive coordinator, especially this season. More than 13 defensive players were out last week against the Green Bay Packers, and they still found a way to win that football game. And their defense was going out there. They were harassing Jordan Love the entire day. Their defense has taken a step back without Aiden Hutchinson, but it's not that much of a step. Aiden Hutchinson is going to be one of the best pass rushers in the NFL for years to come, and it's a great chance that Aiden Hutchinson will play in the Super Bowl if the Detroit Lions can go all the way to the Super Bowl. So imagine him and Zadarius Smith on the field at the same time. But you look at Aiden Hutchinson right before he got injured against the Dallas Cowboys, and they completely killed the Cowboys on the road in their house, and they ran up the score on them. That's one thing with the Detroit Lions also. They're going to play you from bell to bell. They don't believe in just letting up in the second half. They're going to keep their foot on your throat the entire time. But you look at Aiden Hutchinson. You selected him in the first round a couple of years ago. A great pass rusher from Michigan. Hometown kid. This man is phenomenal. He's going to be on pace to go out there and win Defensive Player of the Year. In my opinion, with the way that he was playing at the time, he was the best defensive player in the NFL. They had to make a move. They bring in Zadarius Smith, very good pass rusher. Now, he's no Aiden Hutchinson, but he's very good at sealing off the edge, putting pressure on the quarterback, and stopping the run. And that's the one thing with the Detroit Lions. Even from last season to this season, their rushing defense has been very good. You look at the rushing defense with the Detroit Lions, it's hard to run the football on this team because of Aiden Hutchinson in the past, Liam McNeil. That's why they gave him a contract extension at the defensive tackle position. He does so many good things besides just pushing the pocket and getting to the quarterback, can stop the run, can eat up double teams. He's freeing up guys off the edge. He's just a phenomenal defensive player. You even have the second and third string guys that came into the game against the Green Bay Packers against their starting offensive linemen, and they were going out there and they were still putting pressure on Jordan Love. They're making adjustments. That says a lot about coaching versus talent. Yes, the Detroit Lions, they have the talent, but they also have the coaching. If you're one of the fans, you say, hey, how much coaching plays in part of a great team in the NFL? This is a clear example on the defensive end. Aaron Glenn is dealing with second and third string players for majority of the matchups in the last few games, and yet this defense has still found a way to go out there and perform, and they're still finding ways to win football games. When I look at this secondary, it's a very good secondary. Now, they're numbered. They're not the best in the NFL. They're not even above average in terms of passing defense. But this is a thing that you may not understand. They only have allowed 11 passing touchdowns on the season, but they have 14 interceptions as a team. Let that sink in. So just because you're getting a bunch of yards on the Detroit Lions doesn't mean you're going anywhere. And it's so hard to run the football on this team, especially in the red zone situations. They're going to make you go out there and take three over and over again. And you also have to take this into account. Part of the reason why their defense is giving up some touchdowns, like how they gave up 3 rushing touchdowns last week to Josh Jacobs, they're going for it in their own territory because Dan Campbell just doesn't care. Dan Campbell is one of those we risk it all coaches. You either love it or you hate it. He goes for it on 4th and 1. And they're on their own 30. If they get it, he's a genius. If he doesn't get it, you may want to pull your hair out. But that's when the defense steps up. I look at it from this situation. He has enough confidence in his defense and in his offense to go out there and convert that play. That's great coaching. You're giving your players confidence. I've seen coaches in the past like Rex Ryan. Sean McDermott has done this also in the past to where they were just punted around the 50-yard line. The Detroit Lions are not punting that football. They're going for it. And when you look at that win last week against the Green Bay Packers, they went for it on 4th down. They were already in field goal range. Let's go for it. Let's make the Green Bay Packers lose their timeouts. Let's bleed out this clock. Let's go home. Because he knew, hey, our defense has played very well up to this point, but they're dealing with a lot of injuries. I don't want to give Jordan Love the chance to go out there and possibly get a game-winning touchdown or even go to OT with this kid. So let's go out there. Let's use this clock to our advantage. This is a type of team. But how disciplined they are and how sound they are on both ends, they can defeat the Kansas City Chiefs. And I can tell you that right now. Their only loss this season was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that was so long ago. And in that matchup, it was just a weird game. Jared Goff had over 50 pass attempts in that matchup, and that's not how you're going to win football games in this league. The Detroit Lions are so good. Jared Goff had 5 interceptions. 5 interceptions against the Houston Texans, and they still won that football game. That is how good they are. They're able to come back and win games. When you're able to win a game against a good team in a different conference, and the Houston Texans, it's not like they're the Cleveland Browns. It's not like they're the Carolina Panthers right now. This is a very good football team with the Houston Texans, even though they're dealing with their own problems. They were up in that game, and the Detroit Lions found a way to come back. We could talk about the fact that the kicker missed the field goal. That's a part of football. That's happened to the Detroit Lions in the past. You battle back through it. So this is a team that has the grit and the determination to get over the top. And a lot of that is because of Dan Campbell and because of the adversity that every single player has had to come from. You even look at St. Brown. Last year, the man was playing injured. You go back and look at the Netflix documentary Receiver. The man played half the season dealing with an injury. And he just played through it. And he was still a top wide receiver in the NFL. But when I look at the rest of this defense, Kirby Joseph had 7 interceptions. That's tied for the most for a single player with Xavier McKinney, who was playing with the Green Bay Packers, a team that you have beat twice in this division. When I look at Brian Branch, was a rookie last season. On the back half of that season was very good. He had the pick 6 last year in game number 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs. I know Kadarius Toney dropped the football, but he was able to go out there and keep his head up with the awareness. Comes back with a pick 6. They win that game. He's been very good this season. He could play strong safety, free safety, play inside the nickel. Just a very good, versatile player. And that's one thing about the Detroit Lions defense also. They're very versatile with their linebackers, with their defensive line, and also with that secondary. Terrion Arnold, who I do believe is going to be a very good shutdown corner for years to come. I really hope that Terrion Arnold can pan out. Because I remember a couple of years ago, they drafted Jeff Okudah, dealt with injuries, was terrible on the field. We're so long from those days. I really wish that Terrion Arnold can just go out there and just be a lockdown cornerback on a weekly basis. And he's getting there. He's had some good moments. You have Ennis, also who is a rookie. He's dealing with an injury right now. He's on IR. He's on IR with Alex Anzalone and with Derek Barnes. 2 very good players, by the way, at the linebacker position. Very good players to have. And you look at Malcolm Rodriguez, another very good linebacker. He's on IR. But you have Carlton Davis. You have Ezekiel Turner, who has come in, and he's giving you solid production. Amik Robinson is very good, the nickel position. We'll see if those linebackers can return for the NFL playoffs or in the back half of this season within the next few weeks, because those linebackers can. That's definitely going to help out this defense. But even with the defensive injuries that they have, their offense is so methodical that they're going to force you to play from behind. If they force you to take 3 and back-to-back drives, if the game is 6-14 and the Detroit Lions get the ball at halftime, you can forget about it because you're possibly down 21-6. And then you have to pass your way back into the game. You're not going to run your way back into the game. And if you're passing the football around, then they can send those dogs after you, and then you may throw an interception to a Kirby Joseph or to a Brian Branch. And we saw what Kirby Joseph was able to do against the Green Bay Packers. He had a pick 6 in that matchup, and it came off of a blitz by Aaron Glenn. This is a phenomenal coaching staff, a phenomenal front office, and for the first time in my lifetime, I see the Detroit Lions being a very good football team, and right now they are a perennial Super Bowl contender in the NFC. They look like the best team in the NFC by far, but I would say the biggest opponents for them moving forward in the NFL playoffs would be the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, their own division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles, and also the Green Bay Packers. I know they beat the Green Bay Packers twice, but it's hard to beat a team 3 times. The Minnesota Vikings are a very good team. Give them a lot of respect. And I look at the Philadelphia Eagles. I have a lot of concerns about them in the past game, but besides that, they're a complete football team. When I look at the Detroit Lions, I believe losing last year in the NFC Championship to the San Francisco 49ers was a blessing in disguise. They could take that loss and learn from it. And Dan Campbell has learned from his mistakes in the past. And the same with Jared Goff and the rest of the Detroit Lions organization. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you guys feel about the Detroit Lions moving forward? And are they the best team in the NFL in your opinion? If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless. Peace.